uncomfortable, but we also have to translate that into practical solutions and laws that can be implemented.
All right, let's get this going. Welcome everyone to Reality Check with Rishi. And we have an excellent panel discussion that is lined up today with the topic of today, something that has taken the country by fire. And we have some phenomenal leaders from our community to talk about this. And so the topic is Black Lives Matters and the Bay Area protest. And we're talking about ending prejudice and racist deaths once and for all. And we are going to discuss the issues that affect all of us, each of us, no matter which way you see it. You know, we are all in this together, and we are going to discover solutions and ponder ways for us to move forward from these current scenarios. So for the last few months on this podcast, we have been talking about the coronavirus pandemic from a variety of different perspectives, ranging from healthcare professionals, their take on coronavirus. We're talking about small businesses struggling to apply for stimulus package fundings. You know, seemingly our stimulus package doesn't quite reach the people it's intended to, which is what one of the things is wrong with politics in this country. We have been talking about workers trying to find jobs. We have had career advice counseling sessions and answering questions and trying to guide people. And we are talking about the whole college admission process as it has changed with respect to coronavirus and a pass-fail grade versus actually getting a grade, or the fact that the standardized testings are fading away for a variety of reasons. And we are addressing the angst of the parents and the students as they try to deal with the situation of a new world. And the coronavirus has left America reeling. And, but in spite of that, you know, we have seen, you know, it's not like, you know, we are getting a respite because a new thing has emerged, but it's not really a new thing. Think about it. The coronavirus was something absolutely new that came on. Let me just move everybody. And if you would like to speak, please unmute yourself. So coronavirus was something that came out from nowhere that we had no idea. But unfortunately, what we're dealing with today in America is something that has existed for a few hundred years. Can you believe that? Just hear the sound of these words. This has existed for a few hundred years. And what are we doing about it? What are we doing about it? So, you know, today our topic is, like I said, ending prejudice and racist deaths. This is sad for America, the strongest, the most powerful nation of the world, and we are talking about deaths through racism. How sad of a story this is. This is incredibly sad when we have to talk about this, and we have all these expressions of outrage happening in the country. So today we intend to take some very positive community action in the wake of George Floyd. And hopefully through discussion, you're going to arrive at some changes that need to happen in our community and in our nation. The following names and examples are of African-American lives taken by police. So Breonna Taylor was shot by Louisville police while asleep in her own bed. Tony McDade was asked to not move on. He didn't. He did not move, but he was still shot. And the most recent one of George Floyd, a father of 2 children, a talented former college athlete, and described by friends as a gentle giant. You know what he would do? He would dance to make people laugh because he had some very kind of like strange moves. But he enjoyed doing that because he was a fun spirit. He was a fun spirit. A quiet personality, but a beautiful spirit. You know, George Floyd died 12 days ago at the hands of, actually, at the knee of a white police officer, while there were other police officers who were looking on. I mean, how terrible of a system we have today. Derek Chauvin, who kneeled on his neck, on George Floyd's neck for almost 9 minutes, ignored the pleas of bystanders and of Floyd himself. I can't breathe. And today, his words are haunting us as America has decided that we don't want to breathe until we can stop this problem once and for all. This is the time. This is the time. It's not tomorrow. It's today. It's right now. And we need to create these fierce spirit. We need to engage the strength of our spirit to go out and make change happen. And it behooves each of us to do that. The protests are happening all over the world, and people are saying enough is enough. People young and old from different colors, from different communities, from different neighborhoods, from all 50 states and many different countries have stood together to express their sorrow and anger, and we are demanding justice now, right now. We can't wait for this anymore. Violence is never a way to move forward, but we cannot ignore the voices of hundreds of thousands of furious protesters calling for change. So today we will discuss how we as citizens, as neighbors, and as community leaders can make that change happen. The systemic racism that has targeted African Americans and people of color for 400 years cannot be allowed to persist, and we must stand together as allies and as friends to push for justice. My name is Rishi Kumar, and today we have some phenomenal speakers at our podcast, at this gathering, which is bringing a lot of folks together and will allow a lot of expression. We'll talk about the issues and hopefully we arrive at consensus in terms of what we need to do, how do we need to move forward, and how do we make change happen. So let's get through the introductions. And we are very honored once again to have former Vice Mayor Jim Davis of Sunnyvale, a former Sunnyvale police officer who's joined our gathering here. Now, we did have a podcast gathering last Thursday, and we had 3 minorities on that podcast. We also had former Undersheriff John Hirokawa of Santa Clara County. He was there. We also had Jed Liano from Claremont, council member in Claremont in Southern California. And then myself. I'm a person of color too. I'm a minority in this country, and we were all talking about common issues. It led to a phenomenal conversation. We had tried to get members of a Black community. I'd reached out to Council Member Larry Moody, who's, I believe, a former mayor of East Palo Alto. We reached out to the NAACP to bring in some leaders to show up at our podcast. It was done with like a day's notice because it was so urgent. We said, let's move forward, let's calendar it. I'm pretty sure we'll line up some Black leaders from the community to join us. We failed in that effort. But it's okay. We had a great conversation. Go and check it out, the video on YouTube. It was just a phenomenal conversation of how we can come together in spite of all the issues going on and how we can figure out, to make those changes happen. So this is what we'll continue today with the leadership of Jim Davis, Vice Mayor of Sunnyvale. And we also have some student leaders in our mix. We have Louis Taylor from Homestead High School, who's a Black Student Union president. We have Dana Johnson, who is also the Black Student Union vice president at Homestead High School. We also have Edana Ogu from Monte Vista High School, and Edana is the Black Student Union co-president. And then we have Danelle McMahon, who is from Dublin High School, and Danelle is the PSU president for Dublin High School. I thank you. I thank all our panel members for joining us and taking the time to be here with us. And please be candid. Let's all be very candid and open, because unless we do that, I don't think so we'll be able to find solution. This is the time for all of us, for each of us to peek into our hearts, into the very soul, the inner recesses of our soul, and bring out the story. Bring out the story, each of us, every one of us. Let's talk about the political system. Why is the system not ready for change? What's going on that is preventing systemic choices being made in all aspects of society? And to make something positive happen from this, its time is now. The time is now. We cannot wait anymore. And so let's get this conversation started. And, the first question I have is for each of our Black leaders. And I would like each of you to chime in with respect to this particular question. And the question is about, as a leading member of the Black community, what do you think politicians, including me, myself, as a council member of Saratoga, as a delegate of the California Democratic Party, as an executive board member of the California Democratic Party, and as a candidate running for United States Congress, what would you like to have politicians do? What do you think politicians, including myself, who may not have taken much action towards the issue, but want and need to get involved now, should do to help? But I don't call it what they should do for your community, what they should do for our community. We are all in this together. So let's have that conversation. Let's go across our panelists and let's hear your voices. Please, let's get going. And let's start with, Taylor, Lotus Taylor.
Yeah, hi. I think politicians in particular can do a better job of being more transparent with their communities. I think
Okay, looks like we have some audio difficulties with Lotus. And I think we have lost Lotus.
Make a change when you're not directly in touch with your community or the students in the community. So I think that would be somewhat substantial.
Lotus, I'm very sorry. You cut out in the middle of what you were saying. Could you repeat what you were saying?
Totally.
We kind of lost you almost right at the beginning.
Okay, can you hear me now? Can you guys still hear me? Oof.
Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you.
Cool.
Hear you. Yeah.
Okay, I think that in general, I think politicians should get to know their communities better. And I personally feel like I don't know my local representatives well. So I think if there was just more outreach and more like, what can I do? What incidents have happened in this specific area? What do you think can be improved? And then also, like, you guys probably know more about the current legislature than we do. We could have conversations about what legislature is in place / isn't in place, what we can add, especially with local police, and like seeing what we can do as like a community to better everyone else and lift everybody up, I think is a great place to start.
Good. Thank you, Lotus, for sharing. Thank you so much again for joining in. And let's go to Dana Johnson.
Hi. Yeah, I 100% agree with everything that Lotus was saying. I also think that more community involvement when it comes to questions that people have. I was actually just having a conversation with my mom, and I was trying to encourage her. I was like, Mom, like, you have to like vote and stuff like that. She's like, I feel like I don't even know these people. Like, I don't even know like what I'm supposed to be voting for. So I feel like community outreach in that way, where people feel like they can ask you questions about not only like what are you going to do, but like how much. I feel like people need to be taught almost about what is happening currently on a legislative standpoint, because I think we can all look at how things are materializing and get frustrated. But I think as a community, we need a better understanding of what laws can actually help us, because I feel like everyone's a little bit confused. But
so on that, it's very interesting because I see that the youth of the country has been shaken up. They are rising and they are chiming in. They are providing perspectives. They are guiding people, the older elected leaders of our community, of our country. They are providing perspectives in terms of what change needs to happen. And this is the time for people to listen in, because I'm reading those emails and I'm reading every single line, because these are the perspective that we need to listen, we need to acknowledge, and we need to act upon. And in fact, what we'll do is we'll analyze some of these recommendations that are currently being made. So my ask for the youth of the country is to act and do something. And one way is to encourage elected leaders to operate in a very specific way, in a specific direction to make change happen, to make sure that we are encouraging certain policy considerations that will prevent this recurring again and again, once and for all, once and for all. So please chime in, don't be shy, engage. Let's have peaceful demonstrations, peaceful. Let's avoid destruction, but let's also provide perspective in terms of what action needs to be taken. What do we need to do to get past this and make this country of ours so much more well-lit? Together, we can all overcome all these different challenges. Let's go to Adana Ogu from Monte Vista High School.
So I agree with Lotus and Dana. I think that just having the community understand what kind of legislation is already in place is very important, as well as the people who are running for office. I feel like they just need to acknowledge that this is an issue, it's a systemic issue, and they need to recognize and understand the experiences of people of color in the community in order to carry out and support us.
Fantastic, excellent. And let's go to, we have Danelle McMahon.
Hi, so yeah, I agree with Lotus and Dana too. I think that like Congress candidates, they should visit the Black communities especially, so they understand fully what they need. And then they can work with the leadership groups within those communities to help improve their conditions. Even now, where you're talking to us about what you can do, I think that's already a great step. And then I feel like once there's a report built, they can gain trust, and then you can challenge the ones within the community to get involved and help make change within the community too. So
Yeah, I feel like I completely agree with that, because I know for a fact that a lot of people feel as if the people who are running for different positions kind of just show up out of nowhere when voting comes around, but haven't seen everything that they're doing leading up to that moment. So I know it's hard for people to get behind people who are running.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I feel like the lack of visibility, it feels like you're not being seen by representatives. And I think visiting communities, and also in general, I think America as a country likes to lift itself up and say, we're the best ever, we're amazing, yada, yada. But we have such a horrible, horrible history of how we've treated not only African Americans, Indigenous people, all people of color, all had their plight getting here, all had their plight staying here, living here. And it's gotten better for some races, it's gotten worse for others, but it's still a struggle I think we all feel. And more recognition of that from not only the government, but, on a state level, states acknowledging their own histories would really be, I think, substantial. Some sort of, we know we did something wrong, we need to work on it, because there's never really been that clear message from America that we know we did something wrong.
Yep, for sure, for sure. I think, if you need to get past this, if you need to define a new future, we have to acknowledge the mistakes of the past, because unless we realize the mistakes that we have done, we will never get through it. So Lotus, I really like what you said, because this is core to the problem that we have. To some extent, our country and perhaps our elected leaders are refusing to face the reality of this. I think to some extent, we might want to act as if nothing is wrong with the country. And as we dealt with coronavirus, we were obviously dealing with this one aspect of the issue, and every other issue had sort of faded out as if they never existed. But, this is deep-rooted in almost every state, every region of our country. This is deep-rooted. And it was a matter of time before it came out again. It resurfaced. It resurfaced with George Floyd. But George Floyd is probably the reason why we will make some changes happen. I'm very positive. I'm very positive. I'm very encouraged to see the level of action. I would love to please ask Jenna to reach out to Jim and perhaps Gosha. We were expecting Jim. He committed to be here. So could you please call Jim if you can and see if he's able to join our meeting here. But let's get the conversation continued with that. And, I do believe that people, may not be aware because, depending on the world we live in, we might feel that everything is fine. But people of color are facing discrimination on a daily basis in their everyday lives. So I would like each of you to share, an example, a personal experience, if you don't mind, that made you feel discriminated or unsafe, or perhaps a story that you heard of somebody who was unsafe. And we had a youth panel discussion just a few hours back, at 10 a.m. So this is the third panel discussion that we are having in this week. We had one on Thursday. We had one on earlier this morning at 10 a.m. And now we are having this one more because this is a very, very important issue that we all need to talk about. Now, here is the thing, right? We had somebody who had joined, a very young member of a community, still in high school. And what she said was, and I'm going to quote for you, what I heard from her. She said that we live in a bubble here in Silicon Valley. And as Indian Americans, I don't see this impacting us, but I feel for my Black brothers and sisters and that we need to do something about it. And, we might feel that this is never going to hit us, whoever you are, whether you're a white person, whether you're an Asian person, whether you're a Southeast Asian person, whoever you are, we might feel that we are immune to racism. It's only for our Black brothers and sisters to face, and I'm okay. I might want to overlook that. That would not be kosher because, here is what I quote, to really hit home a friend's younger brother who is of Indian descent, but with a darker skin tone, who went to Lynbrook High School. He recently talked about his experiences where he was racially profiled and pulled over in his own neighborhood driving home. And you know what? He was aggressively arrested because he was apparently in the wrong neighborhood. What happens when that child is your child, when that student is your child, or perhaps your grandchild? There was no justice for him when he filed a complaint regarding his arrest because the police department found no wrongdoing, and he was released in the morning anyway. Now, there are very similar stories. And I shared in the morning at 10 a.m., I shared personal stories from my life where I was felt discriminated, right? I mean, I came into this country for a grad school education, and I worked for companies like IBM and Cisco, and living in a fairly affluent community of Saratoga. Does that mean that I'm not discriminated upon? And that's not right. I have felt discrimination, not once, many, many times. But in the interest of time, I will not share those stories again. You will find all these podcasts on YouTube. Somebody asked me, where do I find a link to the previous podcast that you did? Please go look it up on YouTube. Our videos are already posted there. You can find them. And you can find the flyers we had posted on social media. But let's get on to answering this question. I would love to hear personal stories from your life. And let's go and start with Lotus. Let's get back to Lotus and let's hear it from Lotus.
From my life in particular, I used to live in New York. I lived in New York for 12 years before moving to California. And I lived in Chappaqua, New York, which is a it's primarily a Caucasian neighborhood. My dad worked in the district. He was the only African-American administrator in the entirety of the district, which had 1 high school, 2 middle schools, and 3 elementary. So I went there for many years. I was bullied by another student from 1st grade up until 6th when I moved. The district was 100.
Okay, looks like we lost Lotus again. So Lotus, I don't see you muted, but we are not able to hear you. So can you hear us, Lotus?
Situations with him. So
Okay. I'm so sorry, but you cut out again. So if you don't mind just starting.
Yeah, I can start over.
Yeah, you were talking about a bully when you were in school.
Yeah. So I was bullied in that school. And regardless of the fact that the district was aware of it, they would put me in close situations with him. So in my 6th grade year, they put his locker next to mine, and they also put him in the same homeroom classes as me, which ended up leading to a physical altercation between him and I, where he obviously hit me because I'm a small person. So it was a bad situation. The district did not give him any punishment. They actually gave me 2 detentions for getting beat up by this other student. And they didn't alert my dad, who worked at the high school, which was less than 10 minutes away. They alerted my mother, who worked in the city, which was an hour away. So it was just a situation that didn't make sense. More recently, there have been times when I've just been in a Safeway parking lot with my mom, who is Indian, and we were yelled at by this other angry Caucasian woman saying we should go back to our country, or, things like that, cursed us out. It was very uncomfortable. She banged on the window of our car, those types of altercations. It's something that's pretty consistent in my life, something that never really went away. Even discrimination from my peers, in middle school, people think the N-word is funny. So they will say it blatantly. They'll say it around you. They will say it to you if they're really ballsy, excuse my French. But it's not fun. It's not cool to be racist, that's for sure. I saw someone said Caucasian. What does Caucasian mean? It means white. Just another term for white. So yeah, those are some of my experiences personally.
Okay, let's keep going. Thank you for sharing. Thank you, been so candid and bringing these things out. Now these episodes, these incidents that happen in our lives, they stay in our hearts. They sort of taint our mind, they taint our spirit, but also it can be a force that comes together and it empowers us to discover much more powerful moments in our lives where we engage, where we become activists, we go out there and make change happen. And that's probably the reason why Lotus is the leader in her school. She's engaged with this problem because she wants to make change happen. And that's the reason why she's involved with the Black Student Union. Let's keep going. Let's go to Dana.
Yeah, I feel extremely grateful because I think, I've lived in various places in the Bay Area, and then I moved to San Jose, and now I'm in Sunnyvale. So I think there's definitely been people calling me the N-word, asking for N-word passes, singing songs, thinking that they're cool because they blast rap music and all that stuff, which has been, which I feel like in comparison to a lot of other Black people, I feel like I have been very grateful. I think moments that I feel uncomfortable, there was this one instance in middle school where there was this white kid that sat next to me, and he had problems and fights with other Black people at my school, was known for saying just very racist things to them. But he was always very kind to me. And so one day I was like, why are you so kind to me, but I feel like you are very rude to other Black people and will say very derogatory and racist terms to them? He was like, oh, well, you're not like the rest of them, and you're smart, and you're not a savage like the other ones. And I was like, Uh, so moments like that, I feel like can make me feel like in order to be Black in this society and to be successful and for people to respect me, I need to be 10 times smarter. Like I have to work harder just to get a decent level of respect, and just not be called the N-word. That would be nice. So it does feel as if I want to be, if I want any sort of success, any sort of respect from other people, I do need to work hard and just be better. But and I'm usually the only Black person in my class, and that's just how it's been in Silicon Valley. So there's always like reading To Kill a Mockingbird, and then every time the N-word comes up, everyone just like looks at you. But there was one instance where I had another Black girl in my class, and we excitedly became friends because I was like, this has never happened to me before. And she told me a story of how she was at the Ulta Beauty nearby, and she was walking past it, and the police stopped her because they had gotten a call that a Black girl had stolen from Ulta Beauty hours before, and they just stopped her, and she was like, may I call like my parents? And they were like, no, like you need to sit here, like you need to stay here, things like that, where it's like, it's not uncommon for us to be racially profiled. But yeah.
Thank you, Dana. And I would like to say that respect for humans does not need to be tied into a state of economic prosperity or the color of the skin, or based upon how powerful they are, or even in terms of the value we feel that they bring to society. Respect for humanity comes from the fact that we are humans. And in fact, this morning I was sharing a story that when I see a spider in my home, just this morning I saw a very a spider, and my wife is she's scared about spiders, and so we have a choice here. And it's basically, it's an insect, right? How do we deal with that? And the opportunity, or there are different choices. It's like, do I crush this spider, or what do I do with it? And what I typically do is I take a cup like this, I put it over the spider, put a piece of cardboard, and then I take the spider and I put it outside our home, because it deserves to live. And this is how we have to treat every human in this world. And, I think to some extent, when you look at Nelson Mandela, what he says is, children, when they're born in this world, they're not taught hatred. They're not born with hatred. Nobody is born to hate, because that is not inherent to who we are as humans. But what he says is that based on circumstances, based upon neighborhoods, based upon who you are, based upon people you meet, based upon learning that you absorb, children are taught to hate, and that's how they grow up to become, a police officer somewhere, who does something, right? And what we have to do is we have to define, why we need to respect humanity and why we need to treat everybody with love. And that's the change we need to make happen in America. Change that we need to make happen within our own hearts, which might mean a redefinition of curriculum that we are teaching in the elementary schools. It needs to start from that level in terms of how we are going to empower our youth to define a new future. Because if they can bring that to the table, they will correct the older generation. They will point out that this is not right, that's not right, which is what we are seeing right now with the mobilization of youth across the country. Let's go to Adana to hear Adana's story.
Living where I do, I haven't really been exposed to, blatant racism towards me. It's more microaggressiveness. I've been told, oh, it's okay. You know, everyone's worried about, oh, am I going to get into college because I'm a senior now? So I'm like, oh, I'm not sure if I'll get in. They're like, oh, you're Black, you'll get in. But that's like, you know, because of affirmative action. But I want to get into school because I'm smart, you know. But now I have, like Dana said, I agree. I have to work 10 times harder to prove myself, which I shouldn't even be having to prove myself, you know. Another incident is like in elementary school, I was always the only little Black girl in my classroom. And we would talk about, you know, the civil rights movement, things like that. And my teachers would call me out and say, oh, she wouldn't be here if this like didn't happen, things like that. But, you know, I thought it was like, it was like special for me. But now that I think about it, it's like, oh, you know, I'm being called out because I'm the only brown person in my class. In high school, you know, I'm still mostly the only Black person in my class, and I get like questions about like, is it politically correct to say this, or they'll try to correct me on what I'm saying, and it's about like Black culture, but it's like, you know, it doesn't really make sense for them to say it. But yeah, that's pretty much the extent to which I've experienced.
So what you just said, Dana, you know, it resonates deeply with me because, you know, we talk about, and we heard this from a couple folks today, that I have to work 10 times more harder to prove myself. And that's the nature of what is going on here. So when you look at, you know, me running for city council, you know, I don't think so. We have too many Indian Americans in politics. We are still trying to figure out our path into politics. You know, it's not like, you know, somebody looks at us and says, okay, Rishi is a politician. When they look at me, you know what they say? This guy is a geeky programmer. You know, and that's the box that we are put into, that Rishi is a guy who codes for a living. And what they may not realize is, you know, my leadership in high tech was as an executive. You know, obviously I did coding at some point, but we are all sort of put in a black box in terms of who they think we are. One time, I'll give you an example. It happened right here in my neighborhood. And in my neighborhood, you know, I'm sort of like the neighborhood leader, right? I mean, I'm like not really bragging, but we did a lot of stuff for the neighborhood in terms of rolling out the neighborhood watch programs. We do block parties. We really brought the whole neighborhood together. And to some extent, you know, everything that I did, right? The reason I'm running for Congress today is because of things I did in my neighborhood. Everybody knows me. Everybody knows me. I can't do any crazy things in my neighborhood. I can tell you that much. So, you know, as I was leaving, I was going to a work meeting and I see this woman who going by jogging. She says, "Hi, Rishi, how's it going?" And I was wearing a little blazer. And what she said was very interesting. She said, "I don't know why you need to have a blazer for a programming or coding job." I mean, she automatically assumed that I was a programmer and I did coding for a living. And so, you know, we are put into these black boxes. But when you talk about the fact that we have to work 10 times harder. So when I was running for my first city council election, I was running against a Chinese American woman. And there were, I believe, 3 other Caucasian folks who were running in that particular race. And I'm going to be very candid and open, right? Because this is the time we need to be open. And to some extent, you know, what I had to do was I had to run the campaign of my life to be elected in city council back in 2014. In 2014, you know, we ran a campaign that Saratoga had never ever seen before, In fact, some of my detractors at the end of the election, they came out and told me, "Rishi, I didn't really support you, but I have to give it to you. The campaign you ran was phenomenal. I don't think so Saratoga has seen that." This is what it takes for someone like me, a person of color, a minority in this country, to win an elected leadership role. Whereas some of the other folks, one time I asked a person who was running, "Are you going to go campaign door to door?" And the response back was with a question mark. Essentially, why? Why would someone like me need to go door to door? Right? This is a reality that we all deal with. And, you know, all of us here have sort of felt that in some shape or form. You know, and then in 2018 for my re-election, we actually ended up going to every single door in the city, every single voter to have these conversations, because you cannot take anything for granted. Now with this congressional run, we have a bunch of interns, few hundred grassroots volunteers who have joined in, and they're doing work with social media, with analytics. They're doing some phenomenal work, and they are there engaged with the causes, with the issues of Silicon Valley. We are feeling the burst of energy only because of the work and the branding that we had established. If we had tried to do this without that fundamental infrastructure and the success that we have had over the last few years, I don't think so this would have happened. It's a phenomenal summer internship program that we have put together with lots of student leaders from different schools, not only from here, but all the way to Livermore, Dublin, Pleasanton, San Ramon, to Fremont, to San Mateo, to Redwood City, to Menlo Park. Schools, students, leaders, engaged activists from these communities are joining this movement because they find an option for them to engage and have their voices heard. That's what is going on. Let's go to Danelle and hear it from Danelle.
Yeah, so one of like the most, I wouldn't say recent, it happened when I was like 12, like I was in 7th grade. I was walking to school and the principal told like a campus supervisor to come see who I was. I look strange because I was wearing, like, I forgot. But so luckily the supervisor knew who I was because I played football with her son. And she was like, oh, that's Danelle. Like, so, and at the time I didn't realize what it was for, but my parents had to tell me, oh, because of the color of your skin and I was taller for my age, they're gonna assume that you're like a criminal or like you're someone trespassing. Because it's racial profiling. But I kind of didn't like really pay attention to that. But when I was a freshman, we had a bomb threat and no one knew why. So we eventually were like just hearing about the news and stuff. And apparently a person called in because they were upset with how our school treated a student after a situation which I'm about to explain. So there were the group of white students, they're white males. They were going around using racial slurs, specifically like the N-word. And an African-American woman, our female student at our school, she heard them saying it and she just asked them to stop saying it because, it's disrespectful. Like no one should be saying it in general. But instead of them just like agreeing, like she explained to them everything of why it was bad. She got assaulted by them. So she left the school and the staff, they just brushed it off. Like it was just under the rug. So apparently once it was found out and the bomb threat was called in, I think it was like a month after. But yeah, that just made me like question the like my safety and how a situation, if I were to be involved, would it be treated? Like if this would happen to me, would I be brushed under the rug like and nothing happened? But besides that, it also made me empowered to join our BSU and get change and work with our administrators to create change. And I currently still am working with the administrators to deal with students who say the N-word and don't know the repercussions behind it. And I hope that gets somewhere, but that's it. So.
Super. These are some very difficult conversations we are having. It's difficult to have these types of, bring these issues out, bring these incidents out, because sometimes you just want to shut them out. But if we don't do that, we will never get through it. So let's see, I would love to open it up for questions as we get through this. And so let's see. Okay, so let's start with Michelle Parsons.
Hi, the question that I submitted was, I was reading some literature regarding the cities around me in the district and how around 30% of the city budget for both the cities of Los Altos and Mountain View are allocated towards the police, even though both cities have an incredibly low crime rate. are there any ways for cities in the district to, are there any other places that those funds could be reallocated that are more productive?
For sure. So, I'm probably the best person to answer this question, but if someone else wants to chime in, you're welcome to chime in. So here is my perspective, right? So when you look at, the short answer is, do we need almost 30%? I do believe there are burglaries that happen in every city. And to some extent, I think the budget that is allocated to these city, and these are typically done by the city council. They are there for a very specific purpose. And I believe the allocation of money meets the needs of these cities, because when you look at the burglaries that happen in these communities, it's creating a lot of angst. And the burglaries have gone up over the years. So the thing is, would I think of trimming down the budget here in Saratoga? And we have basically, it's the Santa Clara County Sheriff Services that we have deployed here in our city, because we are a minimal service city. We do not want to have a police department under our city and to handle the challenges of pension and all that kind of stuff. And to some extent, we have optimized. So let me give an example. Like our total budget in Saratoga is about $6 million we spend for law and order, basically, for public safety. And then when you look at a city like Los Gatos, which is a similar size, similar population of about 30,000 people, they are spending, I would say, about $15 million. And if you look at the crime, there was one point, and I don't have the latest stats from last year, but when I compared one specific year, the crime in Saratoga was a lot less compared to Los Gatos, because we had gone about rolling out neighborhood watch programs, and we had really connected our neighbors to ensure a strong connection, communication, and collaboration to address these types of challenges. So it's the thing is, throwing money at a solution is not throwing money at a problem is not a solution, basically. But to some extent, there is a minimal threshold that we need that. But here is what we can do. From a standpoint of recommendations, like one of the recommendations I made to our Captain Urena, who is, and he manages basically 3 cities under him, which is basically the Santa Clara County Sheriff Department. They manage Los Altos Hills, they also manage Cupertino, and they also manage Saratoga. And so I suggested to him that currently in the city of Dallas, there has been a movement. In fact, it's a new law that has been rolled out in the city of Dallas, that when we have bystander police officers who see something happening, who see something like a George Floyd incident happening, they're allowed to go and restrain the police officer who's currently engaged in that type of behavior. So this was passed by the chief of police of Dallas. So I made that recommendation to Captain Urena that please look at this and see what we can make happen. So now, but this is a legislation portion of it, right? In terms of a policy. But let's talk about the budget. So what we did in the city of Saratoga, we have the Captain Urena and the team, they came back and they proposed body cams. They said, would you like to have body cams? And we said, of course we would like to have that. So now every police unit, every sheriff unit that is deployed in the city of Saratoga, and with that also in Cupertino and also in Los Altos Hills, they all carry body cams, right? So these are things that are going to be very useful. So I think we need to optimize those dollars to make it work for our community. And how do we do that? For example, when you look at training that is conducted by our police officers, they spend 58 hours on training for shooting, to get trained with shooting. And they spend about 8 hours on de-escalation. That was a stat I saw. And that might vary from different counties to different counties, but this is what I saw. Now, I think we need to emphasize the fact that de-escalation has to be taught to them also. And so that budget and allocation needs to be spent, needs to be reoriented in a very specific way. For example, I do believe that we need to leverage other social service programs, social organizations, nonprofit groups who are in charge of very specific behavior. For example, mental illness. I don't think so. Our police officers are trained to handle mental illness. Now, I go back many, many years ago because it's stuck in my head. And probably before the time, many of our audience today, before you were even born, this happened in the city of San Jose, where an Asian woman, I think she was of Vietnamese origin, a Vietnamese American, she was in her home and she was in the kitchen and there was some loud noise, a ruckus, and the police was invited. The police barged in and they found this woman, and this woman had something in her hand and they shot her dead. They shot her dead. And what was in her hand? You know, she had a potato peeler in her hand, a potato peeler. And I don't know how many of you know what a potato peeler is. It's a very simple, small little device that is used to peel the skin off a potato. And she was shot dead because of that. And you know, I do respect our police officers because they're putting themselves in harm's way. You know, their stress level is much higher than you and me. It is much higher than you and me. And that's the reason why sometimes, you know, the stress builds up. But, you know, what if we provided them some training to help address that? And if you also engaged other organizations to be there as a support team to make sure that George Floyd incidents don't happen. So I think there are some very perceptible changes that need to be happening. We also need to figure out, you know, how we can reallocate these dollars to make it better work, optimization of some sort. So it's a great question, Michelle. Hopefully I answered your question.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go to the next question. And from Gary Fussell, what will your policies be? Okay, Gary, why don't you ask the question?
Yeah, sorry, let's see. So, yeah, my question was, what would you do in the forms of policy to make sure cases of police brutality and cases like George Floyd would not happen in your district?
Yeah. So we actually touched upon it in the responses to my previous question to Michelle in terms of what policies need to be happening. And so for example, you know, when you look at the other element is, you know, like we talked about, we need to basically ensure that we are providing our police departments the right type of training. And we need to ensure that we are optimizing the funding and how it is directed to very specific efforts. And then there is also a movement to abolish legislative police protections. And we need to consider that very actively. You know, I think we should not go about this as a knee-jerk reaction. Let's evaluate it from all perspectives. Let's get the experts engaged in this, and let's figure out, you know, what changes need to be happen. For example, Prop 47, you know, and I go back to how crime has gone up in California because of a legislation, Prop 47, that was introduced, and nobody realized the impact of what that would generate for us. So let's be very careful, but let's be open to these ideas. And the other legislative piece that has been talked about is to demilitarize the police. So these are some thoughts that we need to have. And at this point, what we are doing is we are putting together a policy paper that will be published online pretty soon, which is, I've touched upon some of these ideas that we have talked about internally. And Gary, you will find, if you go to rishikumar.com and you click on articles, we have many policy papers there. And you will see a policy paper in the next week or two, which talks specific, which will address your question. Great question, Gary. Let's go to Arnav. Arnav, you have a question?
Not really.
Okay, great. Let's go to Mariam. Mariam is still there?
Hey, Rishi. My question was the same as the one about legislature. I wanted to see what legislature specifically in Congress you would support if elected that would ensure that what happened to George Floyd could never happen. Specifically, I learned recently that chokeholds are legal, I believe either in California or nationwide. And I wanted to know if this is something we can work on banning.
Absolutely, Miriam. I think there is now legislative movement to make sure. I don't think so. This is banned in every county or every city, but that's the movement where it's going to. And very soon, I think this will be a new definition of norms of operations with our police department. But, I think we have an expert here. Let's go to the expert. Why am I even trying to answer this question? Let's go to Jim Davis, former council member of Sunnyvale, former vice mayor of Sunnyvale, and former police officer from the city of Sunnyvale, a man I respect a lot. Let's hear it from Jim.
He's on mute.
Jim, please.
You hear me now?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. I may be professional in a lot of other areas, but working these computers is not one of them. Anyway, I want to thank all the young people for coming forward and asking the questions, and in particular, the question about the what has been termed a chokehold. There have been two kinds of holds that have been used in law enforcement for the last 40 years. One is a chokehold. A chokehold is where you place the portion of your arm across the esophagus and press in, thus stopping the breathing of the person that you're dealing with. Those have been banned. They're dangerous, they're deadly, and they shouldn't be applied. The other is called the carotid restraint. And the carotid restraint is where you place the crook of your arm right underneath the chin of the person, and then using your muscle on your arm and the portion of your arm bar here to press in against both sides of the carotid arteries, which slows the blood loss to the head, which causes the person to faint. Now, it only causes them to be unconscious for about 30 seconds. And then, that should give the officer time to take control of the situation and handcuff the person and take them into control. Many agencies have barred that, and there's the governor today in a public announcement said that, he was going to seek legislation, to bar it statewide. They do have a purpose. I was actually in a situation a few years ago where I was battling a very large man who had also already brutalized two of my fellow officers, and I applied the carotid restraint, and I was able to take the man into custody. You have to know how to apply it. You have to know how to use it and when to use it. We do teach it. And the other thing, Rishi, that I don't think that a lot of people realize is we talk about training at the police academy, but on an annual basis, every department in the state of California has at least 24 hours of refresher training every year. And every year, the legislature has passed more mandates on law enforcement in regards to training issues. And so, law enforcement is forced by government to learn, study, and prepare themselves in a lot of ways. And that's a good thing. There's nothing wrong with that. But, you also have to realize, some of the things that the pressures that are placed on law enforcement.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Jim. And, Jim, I would love to continue to get your perspective. And so, what was, did you experience a very tense situation? And how did you end up resolving it? What action did you take? You as a law enforcement officer, how did you get that going? And perhaps this is a page that the rest of the country also needs to adopt.
Unfortunately, Rishi, I have 38 years of experiences like that. If you'd like to be more particular, I can talk to a lot of different areas.
Okay, so let's ask it this way. Did you happen to see any sort of incidents like a George Floyd or any racism playing out while you were a police officer?
Well, I've been in numerous shootings. I was in the two shootings in downtown San Jose, where law enforcement was trying to take control of people who were suspected robbers. And we had shots fired at us. So I've had that situation. When I was early on in my career, we were doing a house-to-house search in San Jose for a possible burglar. And I came around the corner, and just 20 feet away from me, he came out of a screened patio and ran towards the fence at the far side of the house. I yelled for him to stop. He did. He turned around, he fired twice at me, and then climbed over the fence. So I've had a lot of those kinds of experiences. The one experience that I talked about where I used the carotid restraint, we were responding to a fight in progress at a home. It was on the third story of an apartment building, and when I got there, I went into the door, and I saw the gentleman, the person that was being outrageous, take one of my officers and throw him through a screen door and onto a patio on the third floor of this apartment. And then he grabbed another officer, and he was tossing him across the room. And I should give you some context. This gentleman was very large. He was like 6'4", 280, 290 pounds. And then he came to me. I was able to get around behind him and apply the carotid restraint and take him into control. So there are numerous experiences, and not only I tell you about mine, but you've got 60,000 police officers in the state of California, all of whom have very varied experiences, from situations where they've gone their entire career and never pulled their weapon, to officers who have been in hazardous conditions numerous times and have been shot at and have shot at people. I was very fortunate. I never had to use my weapon to kill or hurt anybody, but it is one of the things that we're trained to use, not only in the academy, but in refreshing training every year in our police departments.
Thank you, Jim, for sharing. Let's go back to our student panelist and see what would you like to share based upon this thread we have been talking about. Let's go to Lotus.
Hi, yeah. So one of the things that interests me about your stories, Jim, is in particular, you seem to be talking about, larger assailants, larger people you were trying to arrest. I'm just wondering, George Floyd was a pretty big guy, right? They had 4 officers there, right? One had him pinned on the ground. In situations like those, do you think that level of force is needed or warranted, especially if the person in question is being complying with all the officers' orders and those types of things? What do you think is the right thing to do as an officer in that position?
Let me make it very clear. What I saw and what I've learned about the George Floyd incident, there was absolutely nothing that officer did that was right. He had George Floyd, he had him handcuffed. He was under control. He never should have had his knee on that man's neck for any reason. They were right next to a police car. They should have taken this person who was handcuffed and under control and put him into that police car and secured him there. Now, I've heard some talk, in news reports today that they were going to wait for medical assistance. Well, if that person was in the patrol car, back seat of the patrol car, he wasn't going to be going anyplace, and medical assistance could be provided. What that officer did was beyond, conscionable. It was a horrible situation. It was preventable. It never should have happened. And another incident that I think a lot of us have seen in the news since then is the and I can't remember, someplace back east, where the officers were going forward. A 75-year-old gentleman approached them apparently to ask a question. They pushed him to the ground, and he suffered a head injury. That, again, was not the kind of behavior that should be tolerated from any kind of law enforcement. So George Floyd, totally unacceptable. There's nothing that I can say that makes it good. And the other incident with the elderly gentleman, that was unconscionable also.
So I have a question for our leaders here, student leaders. And so Jim has irrefutably stated that this was not acceptable. But, what I have been told in some of the communication is, you know, let me just say it, because, what I've been told is, yes, a few Black people die because of police, but then there are a lot more Black people who are killed by other Black people. And how is it even relevant? I look at this and I say, how is it even relevant to our story? Here is an innocent man who's basically dead for no fault of his own. And is that even acceptable? So the problem, what's going on in this country, is we are changing the narrative. Dana, what do you think of this? Any comments?
Yeah, I think bringing in, just the different crimes that happen within the Black community into this side of the conversation of police brutality can be frustrating, because I think they are completely unrelated. Whereas when people are going on protesting or demanding change, they are demanding a change in just the way that racism has plagued our just like government and the way that like police just treat Black people and such. But a Black person has never killed another Black person because they're Black. And it's just for other reasons. And I feel like that has nothing to do with police brutality. And so it is also frustrating because I think also when that's brought up, people throw in the term like Black on Black crime, which is just crime. So I don't really see the point in labeling it Black on Black or all that stuff. I think that's a way that people like to distract from the real problems that are at hand instead of actually dealing with what's wrong.
Let's go to Danelle.
Sorry. Yeah, so I agree with Dana. I also noticed that whenever, like for instance, like Black Lives Matter, that slogan, there are some people who get offended by it, and then they use the term All Lives Matter. And that's definitely another thing where people are trying to change the narrative because they feel like saying Black Lives Matter is racist because we're not including the other lives on this planet. But I definitely, like, All Lives Matter to me, it was created as a way to like downplay Black Lives Matter because I don't want to say that other people feel threatened by it, but it's just, I think it's just any way that they can to downplay any sort of Black protests for their rights to live. They will find any way to do it. So I just definitely, that's like another way I think changing the narrative should not be acceptable in this case, including the black on black crime. That's what they say. I think that they should only focus on what's at hand, and that's holding police accountable for what they did, and then they can address the other problems they have that they want to bring up during that time.
Good, thank you. So, I think we are a little past our time. We plan to talk for 60 minutes, and this could very well be a conversation that can go on for a few hours. And but what we'll do is let's see how we can wrap this up. And what I would like to do is pose a question to each of you, and let's go around and talk about a very specific thing. What can we do to bridge the gap between different communities of color? How do we come together? Let's talk about that, and let's start with Jim Davis. Let's start with Jim.
Well, one of the things that we discussed yesterday on your podcast, and what I'll repeat today, is that we have to have open lines of local communications. Having the governor mandate something, or the state legislature mandate something, or county governor or county officers mandate something really doesn't get to the heart of the problem. You know, our police department in Sunnyvale has what we call a neighborhood resource division. And we go out and we set up meetings of people to discuss problems, crime problems in their area, crime problems at schools, any issue that, comes to their mind. And when we can get down and sit across from a person that can express a problem to the officer, we get more to the root of the problem and more towards a resolution. I also mentioned an organization that is really impressed me, and it's called the Barbershop Communications Program in Oakland. And they have a situation where they go to different barbershops, mostly in some of the black areas in Oakland, and they invite customers in, they invite law enforcement in, they invite city leaders in, and they sit and talk. And the information that I've gotten back from those kinds of meetings has been very positive. From the police perspective, they said, oh my God, I never thought of when I addressed a situation that was brought up, that it was looked at in these kinds of ways. And that's a lot of the problem that we're facing, is that we don't recognize what we're doing as being something that could be offensive. And the other side of the coin is that the public has to know why we do things. I remember one incident that happened a few years ago. We were at a home, a man with a gun. He had his family inside the house, and he had a rifle, and we had about 15 officers surrounding the house. And we were trying to talk the gentleman out. And as we were there, a lady came out on her front porch in the house next door and behind us and said, "What are you guys doing?" And the officer that was next to me said, "Hey, get back in the house, close that door, and keep quiet." So we wrapped up the incident. We took the person into custody peacefully, and the officer started to pack his car and leave. And I grabbed him by the shoulder and I said, "You go back over to that lady's house and you explain to her why you said what you said and what the situation was." And he went back and he had a conversation with her, which lasted for some time because I waited. And he came back to me, he said, "Jim," he says, "I think I made a new friend." But it's those kinds of communications between law enforcement and the people that we serve that have to become more dominant in the behavior that we have with our public.
Yep. Great points, Jim. Great points. So I believe Gosha has a question that we completely overlooked. So let's go to Gosha.
Thank you, Rishi. Thank you for the time. I realized that we're running to the end, but I had a question for our panel. And we were listening to President Obama's speech recorded, and on Thursday, the panel that we had that included Jim, they talked about that these incidents are controlled locally by local people. And our student panel today said the same thing, that they felt like the students wanted to be informed but weren't really engaged. They didn't know a candidate like you, Rishi, who would come and say, "Come vote for me," and then they don't know you. So my question is, for the panel, how does a person like Rishi, who's running for Congress, get your peers interested in knowing who he is to see if they want to support him? And how do we get people of your age who are, some of you are 18 or more? So not yet, but soon. So how do we get you involved so that when you do become 18, you can say, "Hey, I'm old enough now to sit on a panel or to go to a community meeting and take part in the process"? How does someone like Rishi interest you in doing that?
Can I answer that?
Yes.
For it, sis.
Okay. I was just gonna say, I think that it starts not, we are the future of this country, and it starts with us realizing that our vote counts, and our votes count toward our future. But I think what you're doing right now, Mr. Kumar, I think that what you're doing right now is it's really helping me to open my eyes to see who's running for council, holding more of these, inviting more teenagers to the panels, actually, if it was actually possible to go outside and see groups of people, go outside and reach out to students, and just make your policies and what you're running for, just make it known, because we want to know who we're voting for and what exactly they're going to do that's going to help us in the future, and not only the people who are of age to vote. So
to add to that, I think it's 100% an event like this is great, but also the outreach to the clubs is a really interesting approach. I think not only reaching out to club accounts, even on Instagram is where me and Dana were contacted, but also talking to club officers of different schools, talking to their actual student council would be a great way to incorporate yourself into student events or have, on campus type things. But also just making us feel like even though we're not old enough to vote, we still matter. Our opinion does count. Most of us work jobs, right? And there's some of us have to actually pay taxes without being able to vote. And there's those types of things where it's like, hey, maybe we'd like to be able to talk about that with somebody who can make a change or make a difference. But yeah, I think just outreach would be great.
Absolutely agree with that.
That's a
And
great point.
Gosha, hopefully it addressed the question that you raised,
Yes,
a really
thank
good
you.
question. And, when you look at someone like me from the world of tech, I always talk about it, that perhaps I never belonged in the world of politics. And in fact, if you watch the 2-minute personal story video, the story of an immigrant that is playing on my website, or if you just search for Rishi Kumar story of an immigrant, that video will pop out. And you watch that 2-minute video and it starts with, I never thought I was meant for politics, but here I am. And the only calling is for me to address these types of challenges because, I call myself as someone who brings fearless politics. I'm not concerned about this way or that way. I'm really interested and invested in solving the big challenges of our country. And it started from here in Saratoga, fighting a San Jose water company, a very powerful water utility company, because they were increasing water rates. And their profits had gone from $22 million to $52 million. Out of 5 council members on my city, I was the only one who stepped up to fight back. And we have rejected, reduced, suspended 7 water rate increases. In fact, I was told that, Rishi, we don't have jurisdiction over San Jose Water Company. What's the point of taking on this fight? But we did, because we are very new to politics. We have no idea how I'm supposed to behave or operate in the world of politics, right? So I'm bringing my high-tech framework. Now, when you look at crime, burglaries, I was told, Rishi, you'll drop the price of real estate in Saratoga if you talk about crime. And, Jim, a man, one time I was in Sacramento and I'd gone to a different meeting somewhere in Washington, and then I flew to Sacramento. And then I didn't have a ride to come back. I was looking at the train and Jim was at the same conference. And I said, Jim, what do you think? Can I get a ride with you? And Jim was a kind man. He said, yes, for sure. And I'm going to show you a secret way to get back. And he showed me this shortcut. I still remember that. And we missed all the traffic and we had a phenomenal conversation. And I was poking his brain in terms of what we could do to address the burglaries. And, he had a great amount of expertise. And he was coaching and mentoring me in terms of what we could do. But this is what goes on when someone like me, somebody very different, jumps into the world of politics. We are keenly invested to solve the big challenges. And this is what I guarantee everybody. Like in the case of a pandemic, we have called almost 45,000 seniors so far. And very soon we would have called every senior in our district, because that's the data we have access to. We are calling them with specific ask. Is there any help you need with groceries? Is there any help with medication that you need? Can we help with anything, right? This is the question we are asking. We are there to help. And similarly, I'm there for every Silicon Valley resident, because that's the quest I have when we are calling everybody. We don't look at if they are a Republican or a Democrat. We don't do that. We don't play that game. We are calling everybody because I'm there to serve everybody. And what I can guarantee our student leaders that are here, that I'll be watching out for your interest for sure, because this is the fearless nature of politics that we bring. This is the reason why we are running, to solve these big challenges, these big problems. So let's continue to go around to talk about, how we can bring this all together for communities of color. Who wants to go next?
I'll go. So I feel like it's all about willingness. Like, I feel like you have to be willing to have those tough conversations about, like, like discrimination, stereotyping, racial profiling, like how we're having right now. And I feel like you also have to be like empathetic, and you have to have some humility to educate yourself on, history, like African American history, Indian American history, and like Asian American history. It's like you have to be willing to become aware of what these people did to get to their position today. And then I hope that if you become aware, you gain like a certain level of respect to just be around another, like as if it's just like their family.
Yep.
Yeah, I feel like to add to that, willingness and determination will definitely get people to resonate with you as well. Because people, it's hard to get behind people when you feel like, they only show up when you need a vote. So I feel like if you go and try to like learn and educate yourself more about things that we need in like the Black community or any community that you're trying to reach out to, or just involving yourself more and getting around more like the community, it'll feel more like people like to feel cared about, basically, and that you're listening to them. So I feel like things like this are nice, and I know you have an Instagram and a TikTok, so I feel like those are also good platforms to be able to reach out to people.
Excellent. Anyone else wants to jump in? Final words of wisdom?
I think that I like the point that you made earlier about starting to integrate cultural awareness from younger grades. My BSU actually had a meeting with state legislature Rebecca Bauer-Kahn about that. So I support that idea a lot. So I think it starts from our children, because racism isn't inherent. Racism is taught to children. You're not born hating people. But for people who are older, I think it starts with sympathy, education. You have to be, going back to what Danelle said, you have to be willing to educate yourself if you want to change. So I think, having conversations like this is really important, because we're bringing awareness and having different voices speak their opinions on it. And I just think it's important that we sympathize with everyone. Make sure that you look at all sides of the story. Don't just be set on your ideals. It's important that you understand where other people are coming from, so that you can make an educated decision based off of that. So.
Yep, absolutely. Agree with you, Adana. So here is what is going on, you can't walk while Black. You can't jog while Black. You can't drive while Black. And you can sleep while you're Black. And you're not allowed to breathe if you're Black. I mean, that's a tragedy that has played out in this country. Yes, that's the story of George Floyd too. But George Floyd is going to invoke action. He's going to inspire us for action. His death will not be meaningless, because I think this is the time where America is going to converge into a new story. I was just looking at a piece of news that came to me over my phone while this thing was going on, and things are shifting. There are new stories emerging in how we are rallying behind common purposes. And I feel very positive. When you look at Emmett Till's lynching ignited a civil rights movement. And with what historians are saying is that George Floyd's death could essentially do the same. And, I referenced Nelson Mandela. No one is born hating another person. Let's teach love. These are complex times, and we have had enough. It is time we all stood together and said no more. It's time we looked at legislation. It's time we looked at policies. It's time we looked at education. It's time we look at other alternate options, but it all stems from a standpoint of guilt. We need to understand that we have made some poor choices along the way, and we need to correct our course. We need to take these steps to prevent these happening, and it comes from a sense of willingness. It comes from some amazing willpower that we need to reinforce why this is the time we need to take these steps, and why it is important and urgent for us to go towards making this happen. And I will leave you with a quote from John Sakoda from Decibel Ventures. It's a venture capital firm. He runs the venture capital firm. I saw it on Twitter the other day. And what he's saying is, it took a pandemic and social unrest to get everyone to understand how important it is to have great elected leaders at every level of government. Next time you're asked to take a vote, take it very seriously. These roles are not just about politics. They can be a matter of life and death. I've been told so many times, Rishi, I like the fact that you're running, but I'm very apolitical. And all it takes is a nanosecond, and next thing you know, they come running to me that, hey, Rishi, here's a problem, I need your help. And you know what I tell them? I tell them, let me look at who my political connections are, and I will try to help you. Because nobody is immune to politics. We have to take charge. If we look the other way, politics is going to get you. You can't escape. So this is systemic racism that has fomented in our society since the first slaves were brought here 400 years ago. But we can't have that anymore. The time is now. I thank all the members of a panelist and everyone who has joined us in this episode of Reality Check with Rishi. And let's figure out how we can stay informed. Please look at the rishikumar.com/Black Lives Matter and look at, we have anti-racism resources there. And I invite our young student leaders and all these young people who are here today gathered to express their voice, to join our movement, to join our internship by visiting our website at rishikumar.com/fellowship. I invite you to express your voice so that we can create a policy for the future and see how we can address these types of challenges. Stay safe and continue to peacefully protest. I will see you next time, and very, very soon, because we plan to run multiple of these gatherings to discuss these types of issues. We have barely touched the surface with 3 meetings. We'll have many more. I promise you that. Thank you all for joining in. I really appreciate you spending time. Thank you, former Vice Mayor Jim Davis, and the phenomenal student leaders that we had from various schools of the Bay Area. Thank you all for taking the time.
Thank you for holding the event.
All right. Thank you, Arnav.
Thank you.
All right, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of the weekend.
Thank you all for speaking and sharing your stories.
Thank you for being here.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for doing this.
Thank you, Jenna. You did a fabulous job organizing this.
Thank you.